The soft lights in first class flickered out, and in an instant, his world collapsed. Seat 1A, the seat he had paid for, was handed to someone else simply because of status. Marcus D. Ellison sat motionless, his steady eyes fixed on the gate agent. The young woman, Lauren Mitchell, smiled politely, though the corner of her mouth trembled. Her voice was precise, as if reading from a script. "We're very sorry, sir, but you will need to move to seat 22C. One sentence, and the air around him turned into an invisible courtroom. People began to watch. A few phones were already raised. At the boarding desk, Brandon Cole, the tall man in a light linen suit, tilted his head as if detached, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of satisfaction. Beside Lauren, Thomas Avery, the flight purser, stood with his arms folded. He smirked, the smile of someone who believed he was in control. Marcus remained still. He did not argue, did not raise his voice. His heart pounded, but his eyes were calm, like a deep ocean without ripples. In that moment, they saw only a black passenger stripped of the privilege he had purchased with his own money. But inside, a fire had already been lit. The road that brought Marcus here had never been paved in red carpet. At 42, he was the CEO of Ellison Global Holdings, a powerful investment group in the final stages of acquiring Aerospan Ground Services, the company controlling over half of America's airport logistics. On paper, he was just another passenger flying from New York to Los Angeles. In reality, he was the man who would soon decide the fate of the airline serving tonight's flight. Lauren had no idea. Neither did Thomas. To them, Marcus was just another name on a boarding pass, a customer who did not carry the gleam of Brandon Cole's platinum card. "Seat 22C has already been printed," Thomas declared evenly. "If you do not accept, we will have to deny you boarding this flight." Safety, compliance, procedure, all words thrown out to mask the truth. They had chosen the white man over Marcus. Marcus gave a faint nod. "Print it," he said, his voice low, soft yet sharp like forged steel. Lauren faltered for a second, while Thomas's smirk widened. They thought he had surrendered. What they did not know was that every word, every glance, every act had been etched into Marcus's memory as living evidence. The new boarding pass was placed into his hand. He turned away, shoulders square, head held high. Eyes followed him, some with pity, some with smug satisfaction, others silently recording for a viral clip. Yet Marcus betrayed no wound. He walked with steady rhythm, like a song building toward its crescendo. Economy class, seat 22C, the scent of pretzels, the feel of worn sweaters, the chatter of children replaced the polished leather and wine of first class. To his left sat a boy clutching a stuffed dinosaur. To his right, a weary nurse in uniform with kind eyes. "You can take the armrest," Marcus said softly. "Only if we share," she replied with a tired smile, but her eyes shone with empathy. She had seen what happened at the gate. She knew he had just been diminished because of his skin color. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Marcus shook his head. "You did nothing wrong." He opened his phone under the dim glow of airplane mode. A short message sent, 12:07 East Town. Note, Skycrest 9117, C23. Lauren Mitchell, Thomas Avery, witness evidence, chairing meeting tomorrow. The reply came instantly from Cynthia Hayes, legal counsel, a single check mark. The world thought he had lost. In truth, he had just launched a campaign. As Thomas pulled the curtain shut between first class and economy, Marcus felt a chill. That curtain was not just fabric, it was a symbol of division, a line between privilege and disdain. But Marcus did not flinch. He opened his notes app, fingers typing fast, each word pressed like nails into steel. Do not just punish the act. Eradicate the conditions that allow it. That night, he was not a man demoted to a middle seat. He was a collector of evidence, turning humiliation into leverage. And tomorrow morning, in a glass-walled boardroom, the very people who smiled upstairs would tremble when they realized who they had crossed. Marcus Ellison had not merely purchased a plane ticket. He had purchased them a lesson with the very seat they had stolen from him. The engines roared as the plane taxied, the cabin lights dimming. For most passengers, this was just another red-eye flight. But for Marcus, every moment was evidence, every glance a living report. He sat upright in seat 22C, breathing evenly. But in his mind, he was analyzing as if presiding over a board meeting. Who acted, who stayed silent, who dared to speak, were noted. Beside him, young Ethan leaned over and placed his stuffed dinosaur in the hands of the stranger next to him, a gesture of innocent trust. Marcus smiled faintly, and in that moment, the humiliation of being pushed into economy transformed into something else. Fuel to protect future generations from the same experience he had just endured. A figure appeared, a young flight attendant with neatly braided hair, her name tag reading Danielle Moore, leaned close. Her voice was low, trembling but firm. "Sir, I want to apologize. This is not how we are trained to treat passengers." I tried to protest at the gate, but Mr. Avery said, "Optics are management's problem." Marcus looked into her eyes. There he saw the torment of someone too young, trapped between duty and conscience. He gave a small nod. "Thank you, Moore. You just did what many wouldn't dare. Remember this moment." Danielle swallowed hard, nodded, then bent to adjust the blanket over Ethan, as if that had been her purpose all along. She walked away, leaving behind a small but indelible mark. In the shadow of injustice, there is always a light that insists on breaking through. Marcus opened his phone and noted the details. 11:55 p.m. 12:07 a.m. Skycrest 917. Personnel involved. Fabricated reasons. The words were short and sharp as blades. Lauren Mitchell. Forced VIP seat reassignment. Thomas Avery. Fabricated safety pretext. Passenger. Brandon Cole. Beneficiary of wrongful privilege. Witnesses, multiple passengers recording. Beneath his notes, he typed one line. Polite, inflexible, confident, all documented. Throughout his career, Marcus had learned one truth. Real power is not the loudest voice in the room, but the one holding the minutes at the end. 2 hours later, as the cabin glowed in soft purple light announcing dawn, Marcus had slept only a few minutes. Memories returned in fragments. The early days he entered finance, boardrooms where he was the only black man, the times he was mistaken for an assistant, called by the wrong title. Yet he had endured, climbing every rung until today. And now he would turn this humiliation into the foundation for reform. When the wheels hit the runway in Los Angeles, he was ready. A message lit his screen. Conference ready. 9:00 a.m. ET. Participants confirmed. From Cynthia Hayes. Marcus smiled. Seat 22C was no failure. It was the temporary command post of a full-scale cultural overhaul. Morning in Los Angeles. The city smelled of ripe oranges, golden light washing over Century Boulevard. A sedan carried Marcus from the airport toward the glass towers of Ellison Global Holdings. In the trunk, a soft leather briefcase held the billion-dollar acquisition documents, but in his mind was a different file, one more important, the cultural audit of Aerospan. In the rearview mirror, Marcus's reflection was sharp, strong, but edged with fatigue. He remembered Lauren's cold 22C, delivered like a verdict. He remembered Thomas's defiant smile and Brandon's evasive eyes. They would all be in the boardroom this morning. As the car turned onto Wilshire Boulevard, his phone lit again. "Should I add Brandon Cole to the meeting list?" Cynthia asked. Marcus typed back, "Yes, witness, and culture test." One tap on send closed the chapter of the long night's flight and opened a new battle, not in the sky, but in a boardroom of glass and steel. And there, no seat would be switched. Marcus closed his eyes and drew a deep breath. In just a moment, when the conference screens came alive, they would all understand. Last night, they had not humiliated just another passenger. They had touched the very man who now held their fate. 9:15 a.m. in New York. 6:15 a.m. in Los Angeles. In the glass-walled boardroom on the 32nd floor, the screen split into squares, each face appearing like an electronic courtroom. Marcus stood, refusing a chair. Behind him, the vast window framed Los Angeles, bathed in golden sunrise. He wanted the world to see. He did not need a seat of power, because he was power itself. In the top left square, Lauren Mitchell. Her face was taut, lipstick faded, eyes swollen from lack of sleep. Beside her, Thomas Avery, his purser uniform pressed, hair slicked with gel. He sat upright like in a parade, yet his eyes darted away. Below, David Shaw, JFK station manager, shoulders weighed down by disordered files. Rebecca Holt, regional ops, 25 years of experience, but weary eyes, too practiced in dodging responsibility. Another square, Danielle Moore, sitting in the crew lounge, fluorescent light casting a halo around her braids. Finally, Brandon Cole, no longer in chic linen, but a grey hoodie, slouched with the arrogance of someone convinced he would escape unscathed. Marcus swept his gaze across each face, then spoke. "We are recording. This is a fact. Finding session regarding Skycrest 9115, Gate C23, last night. What is the first principle across Ellison Global and our contractors?" Rebecca swallowed hard, reciting mechanically. "Safety, dignity, on time." Marcus nodded. "Good. Then tell me, what happened last night?" Lauren licked her lips. "We were just following policy. We are allowed to reassign passengers when necessary." "Cite the policy," Marcus cut in, voice cold. "Not slogans, the line from the training manual." Silence. Lauren lowered her head. Thomas interjected, his voice sharp to mask the tremor. The VIP seat had a safety issue. I made the decision to reassign the passenger to avoid delays. Safety? Marcus raised an eyebrow. So for safety, I was moved from 1A to the middle seat in 22C? He paused, then turned toward the screen. Cynthia, play the recording. The speakers carried the exchange. Lauren. We have to move you to 22C. Marcus. Why? Lauren. Because a platinum priority passenger needs the seat. The boardroom froze. No more safety. No more compliance. Only the naked truth. David Shaw flipped through his file, voice faint. According to Training Deck, slide 12, under all circumstances, a paid VIP seat cannot be taken to accommodate a loyalty upgrade. Marcus narrowed his eyes. Thank you, Mr. Shaw. So what happened at gate C23? Was that policy, or was it preference wearing a uniform? Lauren went pale. Thomas flushed, biting his lip. Brandon Cole looked away, suddenly diminished. Marcus pressed on, his voice steady, every word a hammer blow. You thought you were pleasing a VIP, but the man you degraded was the one renewing Aerospan's contract. You took my seat, and with it, your own careers. He turned to Danielle's square. More, you approached me in row 22. You tried to intervene at the gate. What were you told? Danielle clasped her hands. Mr. Avery said, optics are management's problem. Marcus stared straight into the lens, his eyes piercing the screen. If any organization builds a culture where optics matter more than ethics, that culture is dead on arrival. No one spoke. The air thickened. People assume the drama ends at the boarding gate. But Marcus knew. The true drama always comes in the aftermath. He drew a deep breath, then declared, effective immediately. Thomas Avery, terminated for fabricating a false safety pretext to mask favoritism. Lauren Mitchell, terminated for unlawful seat reassignment and failure to report incident. David Shaw, removed as JFK station manager for lack of oversight. You may reapply in another department after retraining. Danielle Moore, promoted to cabin service lead, effective upon completion of training. The screen went still. Lauren covered her mouth. Thomas sat frozen like a paused video. David trembled, clutching an empty coffee cup. Danielle broke into tears, the cold fluorescence in her lounge suddenly glowing like a crown. Marcus did not need to shout. He did not slam the table. He simply laid the truth before them and let them confront it. One square shifted. Brandon Cole cleared his throat. I didn't know that seat had been sold. They told me it was open. I just accepted. Marcus gave a slight nod. You thought that privilege was fairness, but true fairness is when you see another person demeaned and refuse to benefit. You did not do that. And here is the lesson. Privilege often happens off camera. Brandon lowered his head, and for the first time that morning, his arrogance gave way to shame. Marcus closed the file. Last night, I didn't just lose a seat. You sent a message that when a white man with status arrives, a black man who has fully paid is only optional. That is not policy. That is not brand. And I will never let it happen again. In the glass chamber, The rising sun poured in, casting its light across Marcus's back like an invisible oath. The boardroom was silent. No more keystrokes. No more ragged breathing. Every square on the screen was a frozen face, as if they had just heard the final verdict of their lives. But Marcus knew discipline was only the beginning. What mattered more was changing the system that had created such arrogance. He calmly placed his hand on the ebony table, his voice steady yet sharp. "We will not let last night become an isolated stain. We will turn it into a milestone. And that milestone begins today." He paused, letting each eye confront the truth. Then Marcus leaned toward the camera, his tone dropping. "Rebecca Holt, as Regional Ops, answer me this. If one customer has fully paid for a VIP seat and another has higher status, who is prioritized?" Rebecca trembled before answering. "The paying customer, sir. Status must never outrank purchase." "Correct. So last night, what happened at gate C23? Status won over purchase." Marcus nodded. "Exactly. And when that happens, our product becomes a bargaining chip and our values become a suggestion. That is the death of a brand." He turned his back, gazing out the blazing glass window. Morning light struck, casting a fiery streak across his navy suit. He spoke slowly, each word carved with clarity. "From this moment, every aerospan station across the United States will undergo mandatory retraining over the next 14 days. Content will include priority order, purchase before perks, escalation procedure. Any conflict between a paid amenity and a loyalty request must be reported directly to a manager while activating the ethics hotline. No exceptions." Rebecca gave a small nod, and for the first time that morning, her eyes carried true seriousness. Marcus continued. "Second, at every gate and crew lounge, there will be anonymous reporting boards with QR codes. If you witness favoritism, report it instantly. I want truth flooding in like light, because only light kills darkness." Danielle raised her head, eyes still red, but burning with new resolve. "Third," Marcus pressed, "there will be quarterly spot audits, unannounced, like secret shoppers. And understand this, if I can sit in 22C without being recognized, I can walk into any gate without anyone having some time to prepare." Lauren shrank back. Thomas avoided his gaze. The air grew heavier. But Marcus was not finished. He bent down, signed his name on a document, then looked up, eyes like blades. "Fourth, promotions will no longer depend on seniority or polished reports. From now on, proof of doing the right thing will be the condition for advancement. Whoever has the courage to speak up, I will find them, and I will place them in leadership." Danielle's eyes brimmed. She covered her mouth, afraid of breaking down in the middle of the meeting. Marcus turned, his tone softening. "Moore, you had the courage to speak, even if it was just a whisper in row 22. That is leadership. Remember this, when you lead, lead as the person you already were before the title." She nodded hard, her shoulders trembling. In that moment, everyone understood. This was not just a CEO making decisions. This was a leader rewriting culture from its roots. Marcus turned to Brandon Cole. His voice slowed, lowered, but sharp enough for every square to hear. "Mr. Cole, I do not blame you for accepting the upgrade. But you must understand something. Privilege often does not need to be requested. It happens quietly, off camera. And your silence last night was complicity. Brandon bowed his head. I didn't see when they moved you. If I had known, I would have. Marcus raised a hand, cutting him off. That is the problem. Privilege allows people not to see. But I hope today you have seen. The boardroom fell silent again. Then Marcus closed his notebook and concluded, We are not selling seats. We are selling signals. Last night, C-23 sent a signal that a black man who paid in full could still be dismissed when a white man with status appeared. That signal ceases to exist today. He paused, eyes sweeping across every face. And remember this. If forced to choose between pleasing the powerful and keeping our promise, we will always choose the promise. Because power shifts, but promises do not. The morning sun poured through the glass walls, wrapping Marcus in a halo of light. That morning he did not just correct a mistake. He laid the foundation for a new system, one where ethics would no longer be devoured by optics, and where a VIP seat would never again be a token of exchange, but a sacred covenant with the trust of the customer. The conference screen slowly faded, each square disappearing like doors closing in silence. The 32nd floor boardroom was left with nothing but the steady hum of the air conditioning and the glow of morning light spilling through the glass wall. Marcus stood still. He did not smile. He did not sigh. True power does not need applause. It lives in the final silence, when no one dares to speak. At the far end of the table, Miller, COO of Ellison Global, leaned forward. He had been Marcus's right hand for years, his salt and pepper hair and seasoned eyes carrying the weight of experience. Miller exhaled, voice low. Ellison, you need to make this public. Otherwise, people will dismiss it as rumor. Marcus turned, his gaze sharp as a blade. Not now. Do you know why? Because a flood cannot be advertised while the dam is still leaking. Let me patch the cracks before we display the strength. Miller pressed his lips together, then nodded. You were remarkably calm. I honestly did not expect you to stay so composed. Calm? Marcus shook his head, a thin smile tugging at his mouth. No, Miller, I wasn't calm. I was precise. People often mistake precision for calmness, because they don't believe rage can be packaged neatly like a plan. The answer left Miller silent. He knew he had just witnessed discipline at its highest form, the kind forged only by those who had been underestimated from the start. A notification lit up on Marcus's screen. More. Private line waiting. He tapped. Danielle Moore appeared, still seated in the crew lounge, the old plastic chair trembling under harsh fluorescent light. Yet her posture was straight, her shoulders taut, as if she were bracing for a ceremony. Are you steady, Moore? Marcus asked. Yes, sir. Her voice trembled, but her eyes burned bright. Marcus spoke slowly. Last night, you did two things many never accomplish in a lifetime. First, you tried to stop wrongdoing at the gate. Second, You gave a child in economy a sense of safety, even though you were trembling yourself. Both acts share one truth. You did not choose power for yourself. You chose dignity for others. That is leadership. Danielle covered her mouth, tears welling. Thank you, sir. I just didn't want that boy to see injustice and think it was normal. Marcus nodded. And that is why you deserve to lead. But remember this. When you walk into a room with the title lead, do not forget who you were before that title. Do not forget you once whispered an apology in the dark, knowing you could be punished for it. She nodded hard, shoulders trembling. I promise. Marcus softened his tone. Now go outside more. Into real light, not neon. Take a deep breath. You deserve it. The screen went dark. In that moment, Marcus realized, sometimes the greatest strength is not in firing the wrongdoer, but in lifting the one who was right. He turned back to the table. On the screen, Cynthia's summary appeared. Terminations, 3. Reform program, implemented in 14 days. Audits, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. Apology letter, draft in progress. Marcus skimmed quickly, then added one final line. Apology to be issued to the displaced customer by name. Cynthia responded instantly. Do you want your name on it? Marcus replied simply, No, I don't need credit. I need correction. Outside, the Los Angeles sun rose higher, reflecting on glass towers like 1,000 upright swords. Marcus closed his eyes, letting his breath sink with the pulse of the city. In silence, he typed a note to himself. Words not meant for anyone else. If one day you must choose between pleasing the powerful and keeping your promise, choose the promise. Power shifts, but promises do not. Remember this, Marcus. Hold it like an anchor on the worst day. He pinned the line at the top of his notes. Because he knew culture does not steer itself unless someone drives the anchor deep. In that moment, Marcus no longer saw himself in seat 22C from the night before. He saw himself standing in a glass tower, quietly turning the rudder of a massive ship. And this time, the rudder would not point toward shallow optics or counterfeit power. It would point toward the promise that dignity is not a commodity to be bargained away. The Los Angeles morning had barely warmed when Skycrest's internal network was shaken. Short, dry memos, stripped of embellishment, landed in every employee's inbox. Findings and actions. Skylark 917. Gate C23. The words were cold as steel. Violation of VIP seating policy. Involved employees. Mitchell, Avery, Shaw. Disciplinary action. Termination or removal from post. Emergency promotion. Danielle Moore, cabin service lead. Mandatory retraining to be implemented within 14 days. No exclamation marks. No capital letters. The shorter the summary, the heavier its weight. By noon, another document appeared, no longer internal. A public apology from Skycrest Air. It carried no evasive phrases like, if anyone felt offended, or a possible misunderstanding may have occurred. No. It said plainly, a black passenger was removed from a paid VIP seat to make room for another customer. This action was against regulations and violated the principle of dignity we pledge to uphold. We apologize. We are taking immediate corrective action. Online, the reaction exploded. People reshared the clip filmed at gate C23, where Marcus walked with his back straight and eyes calm while being pushed down to economy. Captions beneath the video bore thousands of comments. This is exactly why transparency is essential in service industries. He didn't need to shout. His silent walk alone made the entire system tremble. Who still believes in status now? The hashtag #seat22C began spreading. From a seat number, it became a symbol, a reminder that injustice can happen to anyone, but also a starting point for change. In the glass-walled office of Ellison Global, Marcus watched the screen. He showed no satisfaction, no outrage, only silence. Every tweet, every shared clip, he treated like waves crashing against a shore, not to lift him up, but to test whether the dam he had built could hold. Cynthia walked in with a fresh report. "The press is demanding the name of the displaced passenger. Do you want it released?" Marcus shook his head, eyes fixed on the screen. "No. Last night was not about me. It was about principle. If they remember my name, they will turn it into a personal story. I want them to remember the signal, not the name." Miller, standing near the window, chuckled softly. "You know, Marcus, they thought you were weak sitting in 22C. But 22C turned into the most powerful seat in America this morning." Marcus remained silent. He knew Miller was right, but deeper inside, another thought lingered. A seat holds no power. Power lies in how one chooses to sit in it. By afternoon, news broadcasts were looping the story. Images of the displaced passenger played alongside announcements of staff dismissals. Commentators debated fiercely. This is a textbook example of covert discrimination. This is not about one person. It's about culture. Can Skycrest survive this crisis? At Skycrest's New York press room, a reporter raised a microphone. "Who was the passenger? Is he satisfied with this apology?" The spokesperson, sweat beading on his temple, could only answer, "He accepted the apology, and he specifically requested his name not appear in the statement. He does not want credit. He wants correction." The room gasped. A brief silence followed. Then reporters nodded. They understood. Late that night, as Los Angeles glowed with city lights, Marcus walked down Fifth Avenue. His footsteps echoed on the stone pavement, mingling with the roar of cars and the hum of life. He watched couples bicker over dinner, children tossing a ball by the curb, business people rushing with phones pressed to their ears. What is America? Marcus asked himself. A patchwork of laws and loopholes, kindness and convenience, dignity and discounts. And if you are fortunate enough to lead, you must choose. What will you protect? He stopped before a glass tower, where the city lights cast his shadow onto the street. That shadow was not the man pushed from seat 1A. It was the stance of someone who had proven that even seat 22C could become a podium, where an entire system had no choice but to bow and relearn the meaning of dignity. The next morning, as the sun bathed Los Angeles in gold, seat 22C was no longer just a hashtag. It had become a symbol, a whisper amplified into a roar, from social media to coffee shops, from personal blogs to morning news shows. People who had once been denied service, who had once been judged by their skin color or appearance, began recounting their experiences under the same banner. Seat 2C. An Asian man posted, "I was once pushed out of business class because they said the system automatically reassigned seats. Today I know I wasn't the only one." A single Latina mother wrote, "Seat 2C is me when the bank denied my loan even though I qualified. Thank you for turning silence into a voice." A black student commented, "I can't afford seat 1A, but I know what it feels like to be treated as if I don't belong. Thank you for turning a middle seat into a podium for dignity." Each story was a brick. Together, they built a massive wall, staring directly at a system that had long valued optics over fairness. In his glass office on Wilshire, Marcus sat before the screen, reading each line. Every testimony cut into old scars. He remembered being 27, walking into a meeting room at an investment firm and being mistaken for the water server. He remembered being 33 after delivering a successful presentation, hearing someone whisper, "He must just be a front for someone else behind him." Those invisible scars were now being revealed en masse. It was no longer a personal story, but a collective current. Marcus leaned back, eyes closed. Danielle's words echoed. "I didn't want that boy to think injustice was normal." That sentence was like a flashlight cutting into the deepest darkness. At exactly 10 a.m., an urgent call came from New York. Cecilia Hart, chief legal counsel, appeared with urgency in her voice. "Marcus, the Department of Transportation is involved. They're demanding a full report. They say the incident at gate C23 could become a new standard for the entire industry." Marcus opened his eyes, his gaze sharp as a blade. "Good. This is not just a violation to address. This is an opportunity to rewrite the unwritten law that has lingered too long." Miller interjected, his tone edged with concern. "But making this public will throw Aerospan into chaos. It could jeopardize the acquisition deal." Marcus answered firmly, without hesitation. "$1 billion deal means nothing if it's built on a rotten culture. If I have to, I'll shut it all down and rebuild from the ground up." The room fell into silence. No one dared interrupt. That afternoon, another online meeting convened, but this time it wasn't just Aerospan. Executives from transportation partners, banks and hotels Ellison Global had invested in joined the call. They all wanted to hear directly. How would Marcus handle the storm? He stood, tightened his tie, and stepped toward the window. The world outside seemed to pause and listen. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice resonant. "Seat 222C is not a seat. It is a signal. It asks us, when power comes knocking, do we choose to serve power or to keep our promise to the customer? If we choose power, a brand is only an illusion. If we keep our promise, a brand becomes a legacy." A few nods appeared on the screen. Someone even clapped lightly, though the meeting wasn't over. Marcus continued, "Ellison Global does not invest to buy profit. We invest to buy signals. If any company disregards that signal, be prepared. Either change or disappear from our portfolio." The air thickened. Those who were used to smirking nervously now shifted uneasily. Those who had remained silent began to think. Maybe it really was time to change. When the meeting ended, Marcus returned to his chair and opened his notes app. He added a line beneath his previous entry: "People break rules not because they want to do harm, but because they believe they will be applauded for pleasing the powerful. Don't just punish, change the entire room." He read it again, sighed, then smiled. Outside, the city glowed in the afternoon light. A group of students passed by the building, laughing loudly. One shouted, "Seat 22C!" as if it were a rallying cry. The group burst into laughter. Marcus looked down, warmth rising in his chest. He understood. This story was no longer his alone. It had escaped the boardrooms, spread into the streets, and become a chant for an entire generation. 3 days after the Gate C-23 incident, the world was no longer silent. From London to Tokyo, from airport lounges in Dubai to small cafes in Sao Paulo, the name Seat 22C appeared on phone screens, morning newscasts, and protest placards outside Skycrest Air Headquarters. International television replayed the clip: a black man in a sharp suit being pushed out of his rightful VIP seat. No shouting, no scuffle, only a proud, straight-backed walk. And then, the very next day, a series of senior staff firings. A BBC editor remarked, "He wasn't just a passenger. He was a CEO commanding billions, and he turned humiliation into reform." CNN called it the silent rebellion. Inside Ellison Global's offices, Marcus looked at international headlines spread across the table. Miller laid down another from a European financial magazine. European airlines now under pressure to review upgrade procedures after Seat 22C. Marcus brushed a finger across the headline. He did not smile, but a hard-to-hide glint of fire lit his eyes. He knew. His private moment had become a lever for an entire industry. Cynthia entered, setting down another folder. "The Federal Transportation Committee has invited you to testify, not only about Gate C-23, but about industry-wide reform." Marcus looked up, his gaze sharp as a spear. "They want words. I'll bring evidence. Prepare all data on passenger complaints from the past 5 years. I will show them Seat 22C was not an accident. It was a symptom." The hearing in Washington. The chamber was packed. Reporters crowded the hallways, flashbulbs sparking like lightning. Marcus entered, dark blue suit fitted to perfection, tie pulled tight, each step deliberate. When he sat at the witness table, the room fell silent. "Mr. Ellison," a congressman began, "can you explain why a single seating incident requires reforming the entire airline industry?" Marcus raised his head. His voice rang out, every word precise. "Because it was not just a seat. It was a signal. It sent the message that the money of a black man may be worth less than the status of a white man. If we allow that signal to stand, we are not just selling tickets. We are selling humiliation, and I will not allow it to continue." Applause thundered through the chamber, breaking the strict rules of decorum. The next day, the Financial Times front page read, "The Seat 22C Doctrine, a new standard for the service industry." Hotels, banks, even luxury restaurants began to feel the pressure. CEOs went on television pledging to review their customer priority systems. From one moment at a gate, Marcus had sparked a global domino effect. Late at night, as the city quieted and traffic horns faded, Marcus sat alone in his office. He scrolled through thousands of messages of support. Amid the flood of words, one stood out from a stranger. "I am the son of the woman who sat beside you in seat 22B that day. Thank you for not letting my child grow up believing injustice is normal. Ethan still has the stuffed dinosaur, and he says it was the bravest friend on the plane." Marcus set the phone down and leaned back. His eyes grew wet. Not because of power, not because of glowing headlines, but because of a child's words. And he understood. Seat 22C would not remain a hashtag. It would become a vow that every seat, every space must honor human dignity. A week after the hearing, Ellison Global released a short press statement. The Seat 22C initiative, a global program to redefine the standards of service. Only 4 keywords accompanied it: dignity, policy, courage, accountability. Nothing more was needed. In the grand hall of Ellison Global, executives, industry leaders, and international journalists packed the room. On stage, Marcus stood before the new logo, the number 22C forged in steel, gleaming like a blade of light cutting through darkness. He began, his voice steady as a drumbeat. "We once believed policy alone could preserve fairness. But Gate C23 showed us this truth. Policy is just paper if culture allows bias to bloom. That is why, starting today, Seat 22C is no longer a seat number. It is our commitment to every customer, every employee, every human being who walks through our doors." He raised his hand, listing each point. Seat 22C, training. Every employee across Ellison Global's portfolio companies must undergo mandatory training, with simulations of bias and how to intervene. Seat 22C audits. Random inspections at airports, hotels and banks, carried out by leaders themselves disguised as ordinary customers. Seat 22C scoreboards. Public rankings of fairness and dignity for each branch and location, monitored by both customers and staff. The Seat 22C Fund. Dedicated resources to protect those who dare to stand up against injustice within, shielding them from retaliation. Camera flashes fired endlessly. A few industry leaders exchanged glances, not just impressed, but pressured. When the presentation ended, a journalist stood. "Mr. Ellison, if you had revealed your identity at the gate that night, you wouldn't have had to sit in 22C. Why did you stay silent?" Marcus paused, then looked straight into the lens. His eyes were deep, his voice dropping low. "Because I wanted to prove that true power is not shouting, 'I am the CEO.' True power is sitting in the middle seat, silently taking notes, and walking into the boardroom the next morning to change the system itself. I didn't need to win that night. I needed to win for every generation after." The hall fell still. Then, against protocol, applause erupted, rising and echoing. Outside, the hashtag #Seat22C surged again. But this time, it was no longer just a story. It became an official movement. Customers began asking companies, "Have you signed the Seat 22C pledge?" Employees began asking managers, "Here, do we choose optics or ethics?" Within 2 weeks, more than 30 companies in Ellison Global's portfolio signed onto the Seat 22C agreement. External corporations, once content to observe, began knocking at the door. "We want in." That night, Marcus returned alone to his Manhattan apartment. He hung up his suit, opened the window, and let the night air rush in. In his hand was the stuffed dinosaur Ethan had given him days earlier, along with a note. "This is your lucky friend. Keep it to remember that you were brave." Marcus placed the dinosaur on his desk, right beside the note he had pinned long ago. If forced to choose between pleasing the powerful and keeping the promise, choose the promise. He smiled faintly. Seat 22C was no longer a story about a seat. It had become a vow, spoken through action, through sacrifice, and through faith. And he knew this fight had only just begun. 1 month later, the world of service had changed faster than anyone predicted. At airports, restaurants, and hotels, the phrase "Seat 22C certified" began appearing on signs, a symbol of places that had pledged to put human dignity above status. From one moment of being pushed down into a middle seat, Marcus had turned it into a global standard. In the boardroom on the 47th floor of Ellison Global, the afternoon light spilled across the long wooden table like a river of silver. On the large screen, a report glowed. 72 companies had signed the Seat 22C agreement. 11 airlines had changed their upgrade policies. More than 200,000 employees had completed the Seat 22C training. Miller, still in disbelief, shook his head slightly. "We're only 4 weeks in, and we've already touched an entire industry. Marcus, do you realize what you've created?" Marcus stood at the glass window, gazing down at Manhattan glowing like a giant network of veins. He didn't answer immediately. In the reflection, his face looked both weary and luminous. At last, he spoke slowly, each word deliberate. "I didn't create it. Gate C-23 created it. Ethan, with his stuffed dinosaur, created it. Danielle, with her whispered words, created it. I only pinned it to a name people could hold on to." Late that night, Marcus returned to his apartment. He hung his jacket and sat at his desk. On the table, the stuffed dinosaur still sat, its round eyes staring at him with innocence. Beside it was the old note, still pinned with the words, "If forced to choose between pleasing the powerful and keeping the promise, choose the promise. Power shifts. The promise does not." Marcus picked up a pen and added a new line beneath. "Leadership is not thunder. It is the barometer, the one who tells the room when the pressure has shifted, and then shifts it." He leaned back, closed his eyes, and let the night air flow through the window. No more noise of airports, no more stares from people who thought his money was worth less. Only one simple truth remained. From Seat 22C, an entire system had been forced to bow, and dignity had been restored to its rightful place. The next morning, as he stepped outside, he heard the voices of a group of students chanting in the square, "Seat 2C, Seat 2C!" Marcus paused. He looked at them, faces young and fresh, many of them never having sat in a VIP seat, yet already understanding its meaning. They held high a sign that read, "Dignity is not for sale." Marcus smiled. He knew his legacy had already surpassed Ellison Global, surpassed billion-dollar deals. It had entered the hearts of a generation. From that moment on, Seat 22C was no longer just a hashtag. It was a collective vow that dignity cannot be bargained, that policy cannot bend to privilege, and that silence, at the right time, can roar louder than any shout. Marcus walked on, blending into the crowd, without needing the title of CEO, without needing the spotlight. Because he knew the man who had once been pushed into the middle seat had stood up, and the world would never sit the same way again. You've seen it yourself. From a middle seat that seemed meaningless, Marcus Ellison turned it into a global symbol. But the more important question is this: if one day you were pushed out of the place that rightfully belonged to you, would you stay silent and accept it, or would you stand up and change the entire room? If you believe dignity is not for sale, hit it all. Like on this video, share it so others can see it too, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next stories, where the smallest moments turn into powerful waves. And leave your comment below. Have you ever sat in seat 22C in your own life? We want to hear your story.